Hello folks, this is Scott with Dallas Paint Correction and Auto Detailing. What a view, right? You get to see my reflection in the paint. There's a reason why I'm doing this. Last night I dropped my daughter off at home and something very interesting happened. I got up this morning and I saw a scratch on my car, right? Bummer, end of the world, holy crap, let's get off the planet, this is horrible. No, it's not. And it's a great opportunity for me to make a video about wet sanding. I'm going to bring you guys closer into this scratch. Hopefully the camera will pick it up. Oh, there it is. Look at that scratch. It starts up there, kind of goes down there. Look at those little white spots. That concerns me. That's a little nasty right there. And then it kind of gets faint. One of the things we have to remember, scratches aren't even all the way through the scratch mark. I have no idea what happened. Did somebody walk up against my car? Was I at the gas station, convenience store, buying myself my favorite beverage and somebody walked against my car? It happens. It's not the end of the world. But I'm going to take this opportunity to show you how to wet sand this. Now, get you in a little closer. You can see the scratch down there. Not so bad. Come up here. Great God. And then up there. Those white spots concern me, and I'll tell you why in a minute. I'm going to set you guys back down on the shelf behind me. Hang tight. It's going to get a little shaky, and then I'm going to go through this process with you. Oh God, that's not a little shaky. That's like a nightmare. Sorry. Hang tight. Okay, so we're going to do some wet sanding. Usually that scares people right off the bat. Oh my God, Scott, I don't want to wet sand. I don't want to hurt my car. I don't blame you, but we got to wet sand. We might as well learn how to do it. It's not as scary as you think. But here's the deal. When we're looking at clear coat, we're looking at a scratch. The first thing we want to do, the first thing we want to realize, clear coat is awfully thin on OEM paint. This clear coat here, some people say it's as thin as a Post-it note. It's actually thinner than that. I wanted to show you guys something. Boy, I should have been more prepared, but here we go. What clear coat, or how thin clear coat actually is, this is a little plastic wrapper, a cellophane wrapper that comes off a pack of cigarettes. If you smoke, you know it. If you don't smoke, you probably have seen it. If I squeeze this between my fingers and roll it around between my fingers, that's how thin clear coat is. It's thinner than a Post-it note. There's not a lot here, but don't get scared, don't get worried. We can still wet sand it. It's fine. We're going to be okay. But here's the deal. Because clear coat is so thin, the first tip, the first rule, the first trick, whatever you want to call it, if you take your finger and run it across the scratch happens to be west and east, so I'm going to come across that scratch north and south. If my fingernail can catch that scratch, guess what? It's too deep. That doesn't mean we can't wet sand it. Doesn't mean we can't compound it or polish it. We can still diminish it greatly, but removing it within 100%, if you can grab it with your fingernail, you got to remember your fingernail's awfully thicker than this little plastic wrapper. It's going to be hard to remove it. And right here, this is a bummer. I can grab it. My experience tells me I might be able to get a lot of that out. I might not be able to get this area out here that was white to 100%. But down here is fine. I can get all that out. That's cool. So here's the deal. The first thing you want to do when you go to remove scratches, wash the panel. Also, clay bar the panel. Holy crap, Scott, why are we claying it? Well, the reason why we're going to clay it, we're going to use sandpaper, right? If you've got any bonded contaminants in this area that you're going to be trying to remove the scratch from, you don't want them to get stuck to your sandpaper and clog it up. You want it completely virgin. You want it completely clean. So what I've already done, excuse my reach, I've washed it, I've clayed it. Now I want to take some of my paint prep. This, you can use isopropyl alcohol if you want. Just want to spray it on the surface of that panel, wipe it in, make sure there's no residue left over from the soap, no residue left over from the clay lube. I want 100% virgin clear coat here. I don't want to be fighting anything when I go to wet sand or polish. I'll explain that later, or maybe not, who knows. But here's the deal. Now that I've got this panel completely ready to go, I'm going to use 2000 grit. I can go 1500 if I want. I can go 1000 grit if I want. I've done it before. I know what I'm doing. I think anyway. Who knows? But I just wanted to use something that would be probably more relevant for you guys. 2000 grit. Yes, it cuts clear coat, but it's forgiving. You got to use some common sense here. You don't want to be applying 30 pounds of pressure when you're going over this scratch. Also, here's another key point. When I start wet sanding, you're going to notice that because this scratch goes west and east, I'm going to go over it north and south, but I'm going to do a little trick. I'm actually going to go over that scratch at a 45-degree angle. I know some of you are going to ask why. Trust me, I'm killing you with long videos. It's a long story. But if we understand how reflective light works, how our little eyeballs work, if I go over this scratch at a 45-degree angle, trust me, it's going to make it diminish quite a bit. Our eye won't pick it up. Here's the other deal. I want to go over this scratch north and south, right? I just mentioned that. I do not want to take my sandpaper and go over the scratch in its pattern. I don't want to go over it west and east. Why? Well, the scratch has got a valley to it, right? Let me try to get my hand just right. It's got a valley to it. If I go with the valley, what am I doing? I'm spreading the scratch out. Not the end of the world, but come on, just think about it. I actually want to take that scratch and make those ends roll into each other, so I want to go over it north and south because this scratch is west and east. Also, when we're wet sanding, we're going to be introducing some water to the system, to the whole creation of this mess. Here's another little tip and trick. I've got distilled water in this bottle. It's not Simple Green. Just have the bottle, who knows. I'm going to spray water on this panel because I need lubrication for my sandpaper. But here's another trick. Here's another secret. I told you about if you can grab it with your fingernail, you're probably not going to remove it within 100%. But you can also take some water. This happens to be distilled water with some soap and a couple drops of soap in it. If I spray this panel, bup, 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 and I notice the scratch disappears underneath the fluid, underneath the water, that's a good indication to me that most likely I'll be able to remove that scratch within 100% because the water actually fills that scratch up a little bit, and if the water can fill it up, I've got enough clear coat to work with, and I can go ahead and scratch my way to perfection because getting rid of a scratch actually means we're going to create more scratches to get it out. But here it goes. Here's another tip. Tip number 2, 3, who knows? Some guys will take sandpaper. They'll put it in their finger, right? They'll use the point of their finger to kind of go in here and remove the scratch. You can do that, that's fine. I've done it before. But I don't like this method. I'll tell you why. Because you can't distribute the pressure of your finger evenly across the sandpaper. So I got another tip. It's this sponge made by, I don't know, Scotch-Brite. Does 3M own them? Maybe. I don't know. I'm actually going to get not only the surface of the panel wet, get my head out of the way, I'm also going to take my sponge, get this a little bit wet, right? This is cool. Cool little trick. Now it's a little bit wet. I'm also going to wet my sandpaper, get that wet. And then I'm going to take my sponge and wrap the sandpaper around the sponge. Why do I do this? Well, as I'm applying pressure and wet sanding over this scratch, north and south over the scratch at a 45-degree angle, as my fingers press on this sponge, this sandpaper, the sponge actually allows the distribution of my weight to evenly be distributed across the sandpaper. That's important. Some guys may use a sanding block. I've used sanding blocks before. I've used it to remove orange peel, you name it. But in this moment here, I just want to concentrate on the scratch. A sanding block is not so forgiving. It's not so flexible. It's not so pliable. The sponge works a little bit better for me. Up to you to see if it works in your world. Plus, it's wet. As I push on it, I'm introducing more water onto the panel. So it's a cool little trick I use. If it works for you, awesome. So I'm going to just get that area a little bit wet, get a little bit on the sandpaper, and I'm going to go in here. And here's the deal. This is the hardest part of the video. Scott, how much pressure are you applying? Not a lot, folks. It's 2,000 grit. I could sit here for an hour if I want to. Go real slow. Take your time. Fear at this very moment, it's a scary process, but fear is also your friend. Fear's asking you, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to learn something? It's completely up to you to say to fear, yes, I do. I want to learn something. I'm going to go at it slow. I'm going to respect what you're saying to me. All of a sudden, fear will leave the experience. Common sense will start kicking in. Some people say common sense is not teachable. That's not true. All of you have common sense. You just deny it a lot. You let fear get in the way. But don't get scared here. Work at it slow. You control the moment. So here I go. Go in over that scratch. 2,000 grit sandpaper. Go over it slowly. How much pressure? Lightly. I can do this a lot quicker. I can grab 1,000 grit sandpaper 1500 grit sandpaper and get this over with, but I wanted to show you guys that you can actually do it slowly. Use a 2000 grit sandpaper, take your time. It's like what Ronald Reagan said back in the 80s, trust but verify. You're going to verify a lot through this process. Just go over it slowly. I want to create a scratch pattern over this scratch that exists. Who put this scratch here? I don't know. I can't go chase them down. Wouldn't be worth it. What would I do anyway? But here's the deal. If you're in woodworking, you'll understand this concept. I'm actually scratching my way to perfection. I have to meet that scratch at its level. I need to create more scratches to get the scratch out. As ironic as that sounds, that's the way it works. So here I go, just taking my time, not a lot of pressure, going back and forth over a 45-degree angle over that scratch. I'm going to check and verify here in a minute. Boy, how much have I abraded the paint? Because trust me, I have. 2000 grit is taking clear coat away from this paint. It's not the end of the world. Okay, so I've scratched my way a little bit there. How many times? 10, 15 times? Who knows? And then I'm just going to lightly go over the scratch, remove that fluid from the scratch, and then I want to start seeing, I'm sure the video's showing it, you can see how I've abraded the paint. I want that to evaporate. What I'm looking to see here is, does my scratch disappear from the scratches I created with the 2000 grit sandpaper? I want to meet it at its level. There's a little bit more scratches underneath there. Again, there was an area in the middle of the scratch I can actually grab with my finger. I'm not going to deceive myself. I also know this is a 2005. It's going to get scratched again as much as I take care of it. I don't want to go too deep there. I can already grab it with my finger. I know I'm not going to get it. But towards the end of this scratch is starting to disappear. Up here it's starting to disappear as well. I want to get everything I can out of, I want to remove every bit of this scratch if I can. Get it wet again. Get a little bit more water on my sandpaper. I'm taking advantage of the sponge. It's distributing the weight of my pressure or the weight of my fingers evenly across the scratch. I'm going over it. I'm using very little pressure. Don't kill yourself, guys, here. Don't think you got to go in here 30 pounds of pressure. You'll remove too much clear coat. It'll scare the living daylights out of you. But just go over it at a 45-degree angle. Just work it slowly. Very little pressure here. I'm letting the paint talk to me. I'm feeling the paint through my fingers. If you notice, I'm not using vinyl gloves today. I want to feel everything. I want to see everything. I want to hear everything. I want this paint to talk to me. Going over it, I'm starting to see that scratch slowly disappear below my own scratch pattern. Am I rambling too much? Probably. Sorry, folks. Somebody said to me, thank God there's a fast forward on YouTube. You talk way too much. But to me, it's about the details. You got to know all of it. You got to understand all of it if you want to do it. You want to do it right. And here's another tip, guys. If you're in paint correction and you're wanting to learn how to do scratch removal, or if you want to enhance your skills with paint correction using a rotary or something like that, here's a cool little tip. Go to an auto body shop. You know what auto body shops do? They'll practically give you fenders, hoods for free. I got an auto body shop town that will just give me stuff for free, and I'll play with it. In fact, I'm going to use one in the future to do how to do paint correction wrong. That's a good way to learn sometimes. Do it wrong first, right, guys? So there I go. I've gone in there. I've scratched that. Going to move that. But what's my point about the auto body shop? Guys, I'm in detailing, right? I do paint correction. I do vinyl graphic removal. I debadge cars. I do engine bay cleaning. I do so much stuff, and I want to diversify myself. I want to stand out amongst the competition. Scratch removal is a great way to make some extra money, because here's the deal. This scratch is about 5-6 inches long. I may charge a customer $75 to remove this scratch. It may take me 45 minutes to an hour. Who knows? Who cares, right? $75 in my pocket's a good deal. It's not all that difficult. It's not all that scary. But here you go. Go to the auto body shop, get yourself some fenders, practice, do it wrong, learn how clear coat responds to a rotary, to a dual action polisher. It's not as scary as you think. So here I go. I've got this thing. I've scratched the living daylights out of my car, right? This looks scary. 2000 grit. Look at all this scratch pattern here. I've removed clear coat. I've also noticed that I can just barely see the end of the scratch. Up here where it was a little thick, where I could feel it with my finger, I'm not going to go much deeper than that. I'm fine with that. I'll live with it because I can grab it with my finger. Up here it's completely almost gone below the surface of my scratch pattern. It's cool. I'm going to stop there. The next thing I'm going to do, I've removed the fluid, looked at my scratch pattern. This is 2000 grit. Some people say, hey, why don't you back out slowly? Why don't you go to 2500? Why do you go to 3000 grit? Well, because I know I can remove 2000 grit sandpaper marks even with a cheap little DA and a medium cut polishing pad or compounding pad, however you want to look at it. So basically what I have here, I want to remove my scratch pattern. I want to restore shine and gloss, get rid of all that stuff. So I'm going to use my cheap DA from Harbor Freight. Going to use a 3-inch backing plate and a pad. This happens to be Lake Country Force pad. It's got a medium cut to it. I also want to use a small pad. Some guys will say, hey, why not just use a 5-inch pad? That's fine, that's cool, you do what you want. I want to hone in on this scratch. I want to hone in on these scratch marks that I made. So I like a 3-inch pad. It's a little bit more aggressive. The smaller the pad, the more aggressive it is. Another little trick there and tip if you don't know that already. The other thing I'm going to use is M105. Why do I use this stuff? Because I use it all the time. I understand it. I know how it works. There's better compounds out there? Yep, there sure is. I use them, but I just like McGuire's. I know the ins and outs of all of it. So here I go. I'm going to put a little bit on my pad. Not a lot. I don't have a lot of work area there that I got to concentrate on. Come on, let's go here. So I'm going to put a couple drops on it. Some guys will say, hey, do you put 3 pea size drops? I don't know, maybe the peas where you live are awfully huge. Where I'm at, they're not that big. But I'm just going to put a bunch of little tiny dots all over this pad. It looks like I'm putting a lot on there, but it's not. I'm going to put a little bit on there just like that. My God, that looks like a lot, right? But it's not. Now, what I'm going to do is lower my polisher down to speed 2. You can go in here and tap over this if you want. Tap all over the place if that makes you happy. That's cool. You can spread it out that way. I like to go to level 2, turn it on. And now I'm going to speed up. Now that I've compounded out my 2000 grit sanding marks, I'm going to take a microfiber towel and just remove the residue, the leftover polish on the surface of the paint. Okay, that's starting to look a lot better. I've removed the 2000 grit sanding marks with the M105, a medium cut pad. Not the end of the world. It will do it, folks. Just work it slow. Learn, get some experience, but you can do it. Some guys will say a cheap little DA with a polishing pad or a compounding pad and M105 won't remove 2000 grit sanding paper. Wrong, wrong, wrong. It will. Here's the next thing. Because I've compounded, this paint is a little hazy. You got to remember, an aggressive compound will leave the surface of the paint. Yes, it's great with removing imperfections from the paint, but it will look scoured looking. It will look hazy. It doesn't look really brilliant, really shiny. So the next step I'm going to do is I want to go over this again with a finishing polish. I can use M205, that's kind of the twin brothers, twin sister, however you want to look at it, to M105. But I also want to put some protection down on the paint afterwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 3-inch pad. This is a Lake Country Force pad again. This is a polishing pad. It's got light cut to it. I'm going to add it to my backing plate. Make sure I got it centered. That's beautiful, ready to go. I'm going to take, you've seen me use this before, HD Speed. HD Speed is a polish. It's a light cut polish. It also lays protection behind, because after, even if I compounded it and then polished it with 205, then I got to put paint sealant on it or whatever protection I want to put on it. I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Use HD Speed. Go ahead and shake this up. Put some on this 3-inch light cut polishing pad. Now if you notice when I'm compounding or applying polish, I'm actually going beyond the scratch pattern that I created. I want to blend this panel in, so I'm going to go a little bit, I'm going to go outside my scratch pattern with my polish and my compound just to blend the panel in. But now I've got some HD Speed on the surface of my pad. I'm going to go in here and I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm going to polish up after my scouring, or however you want to look at it. It's a little hazy from the M105. This is going to remove it. It's also going to put protection on the paint for me. Make it quick, real easy to do it. So here I go. Make sure you're at level 2 again. You can dap, 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 go all over the place, whatever you want to do. Go in, spread it out. Now I'm going to up my speed. Some of you might notice, I typically say when you use a dual action polisher, you want to start off slowly, you want to engage the compound. You might have noticed there towards the end I started working fast, because I know how HD Speed works. The abrasives or the cleaners, whatever's in it, is going to be there for the first 3 or 4 cuts over the panel. And then what I want to do towards the end, I want to lighten my pressure and just spread out the